in the northeast and to some extent in the whole country, especially Borno, Adamawa and Yobe. Before I read out the motion, Mr. President, let me say that after consulting with my colleagues from the Bay States, Borno, Adamawa and Yobe, I have their consent that they should be included as co-sponsors. That is Senator Kashim Shettima, Senator Ibrahim Gaidam, Senator Ibrahim Bomay, Senator Abubakar Kyari, Senator Aisha. The Senate commends the effort of Mr. President Muhammad Buhari in confronting this menace of Boko Haram and ISWA. ISWA is the Islamic State of West Africa that is more operative in that area, dangerously. Farmer-herders clashes in the north-central, banditry and kidnapping in the northwest and other parts of the country. The Senate notes with great concern the humanitarian crisis in the affected states, especially Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe. Worried that the recent escalated attacks in Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe by Boko Haram and especially ISWA have forced over 134,000 people to flee from their homes. As a result, more people are displaced and sought refuge in neighboring local governments and towns that are already host to hitherto displaced persons. According to the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Activities operating here in Nigeria, there are already more than 1.8 internally displaced persons in Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe states alone. That does not include the recent displacement in other states affected by the activities of bandits and communal clashes and the known herders and community or farmers in various states, especially North Central. More than 1.6 million returnees have been recorded so far. Observe that from April to date, Boko Haram and ISWA have attacked more than 10 different towns and villages. This includes Kuda Kaya in Madagali, near Madagali, that is in Adamawa, Mulai near Maiduguri, Gajigana, Dikwa, Marte, Kareto, and Sabongari, not Damasak. Damasak is included there. Mongono, Gajiram, Goneri in Yobe, Isge in local government, and most recently, Talala in also Damboa. Also worried that more than 7.1 million people need humanitarian assistance in the northeast, especially just Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe. And the total population of those three states, 13.1 or 2 million. That means almost half of the three states actually need humanitarian assistance. 2.7 million people need food, and 1.1 million malnourished children needs nutritional support in the year 2019 alone. Concerned that the violence continues to disrupt livelihood and deepening the impact of chronic vulnerabilities such as food insecurity, malnutrition, and epidemics in affected communities. Also worried that the rainy season is on, but there are threats to farming activities which will result to serious food insecurity. Distinguished colleagues, in my local government alone, in Goza, I came back day before yesterday. So far, with the setting in of the rainy season, 51 people were killed in their farms at various times. Note that according to United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Activities in Nigeria again, about 1.2 billion, which translates to over 420 billion naira, is required to address the humanitarian crisis this year, while the total amount allocated to the Northeast Development Commission, including the takeoff grant, is 55 billion, which is equivalent to less than 14% of the annual requirement, just this year's requirement. Appreciates that in 2016, public partners, relief organizations, and other key stakeholders involved in humanitarian activities in Nigeria collectively expressed support for the establishment of the Nigerian Humanitarian Fund as a strategic and vital tool to deliver most urgent humanitarian relief. This was led by the the owner of Zenith Bank, Owando, are the leading people, and they have been able to raise $70 million so far, in conjunction with 17 countries that I have mentioned in the motion. Notes and appreciate the effort also of the Victim Support Program by T.Y. Danjuma, Dangote Foundation, and Indimi Foundation for their humanitarian relief support. Worried that the efforts of the international NGOs and Nigerian Humanitarian Fund are overstretched and donor fatigue has started setting in. For example, donation by international development partners dropped from $730 million in 2017 to $712 million in 2018, and now the contribution so far standing at about $275 million. One important thing to note is that these are donor countries. Donor countries are donating more than what the country is putting into this humanitarian crisis. Also observe that the Northeast Development Commission, which was graciously established by a bill sponsored by the 8th National Assembly and signed into law by Mr. President, to address the issues related to humanitarian crisis caused by activities of the insurgents, is not only inadequate, but the amount have so far not been released to the relevant agency. Concerned that the affected states, especially Borno, which is the epicenter of the insurgency, is also unfortunately adjudged to be part of the poorest region on earth by the United Nations Human Development Indices, has suffered an estimated destruction of $9.2 billion, which, if you convert, is more than 3.2 trillion, with a bigger estimated annual budget of slightly above 100 billion. You can calculate the time it would take to recover the state. Unfortunately, as a state in displacement, the internally generated revenue is so small, almost none. So if we leave this humanitarian crisis to Borno alone, then we are doomed. Therefore, distinguished colleagues, before I go to the prayers, I urge you to try to understand the situation we are in Borno especially. Nobody And I dare say nobody will appreciate the gravity of the situation we are until you go and see for yourself what is happening. Last time, the IDPs in Gubbio camp came out to the street to demonstrate, and they said it's better for them to go back to their villages and die than to die in the camp like prisoners. That was because they wanted to get attention. I went there and I discovered and I was told that for 2 months, the state, which is responsible for the condiments they call, meets its own obligation, but the NEMA and the Northeast Development Commission cannot provide them the grains and food they need. I went to Northeast Development Commission, went to NEMA, and went to the National Refugees Commission. The problem is the same. Funds have not been released to them, and therefore they cannot do, there's almost nothing they can do. And therefore, colleagues, the prayers of this motion is to, one, urge the federal government to, in addition to fighting these security threats in affected states, pay attention to the humanitarian crisis caused by the insurgents and other criminal activities. Two, urge the Federal Ministry of Finance to, as a matter of urgency, release all monies due to the Northeast Development Commission, National Emergency Management Agency, and the National Refugees Commission to enable them address the humanitarian crisis in the affected states. Mr. President, in situations like this, they normally, in the Ministry of Finance, have what they call front loading, so that the monies appropriated to these agencies can be paid to them 100%. Because emergency situation is untimely, it can happen anytime, and they will need resources to address those issues. Third, no, I'm just amending some of them. I read it with amendment. Urge the federal government to submit to the National Assembly supplementary budget to meet the funding gap that is required to address the humanitarian crisis in the affected states. And finally, set up an ad hoc committee to visit the affected states in order to have first-hand information on the issues raised and report back to the Senate. Distinguished colleagues, this is, as I said earlier, a humanitarian crisis that we are facing. And this can happen to anybody. We didn't ask for it. Our people are suffering. Our people are dying. Children are dying right now as a result of malnutrition, hunger, and disease. No one will understand what we are going through. The United Nations mentioned in their report sometime that there are 60,000 orphans as a result of the insurgency. As a senator from that, I was doubting it. We went to where they are and counted more than 60,000 orphans. Distinguished colleagues, this was how it started. People think that it is only our problem. Very soon, this, God forbid, those people suffering from the humanitarian crisis will start moving to where they can survive. Right in Abuja, right here, from my local government, if I tell you the number, you will not believe it. But truly, there are more than 60,000 people from Goza local government in Abuja, in 14 different camps. If you want me to bring them tomorrow here, I will bring them. They have been displaced. And the people, the areas they are living doesn't belong to them. And the people that own those areas or properties want them because they have been there for a long time, 5 years. The recent crisis we are dealing with is that there is a resettlement in Waza where we have 10,000 displaced IDPs that belong to the Gwaris for their resettlement, and they have to move them out because they need the places in order to move the Gwari people in. They came and there was crisis. Right in Apo from this petrol station. You will add, I've read the prayers. So distinguished colleagues, please do something for humanity. Thank you very much.
Kabir Barakia, representing Katsina Central Senatorial Zone. Mr. President, I rise to support this very, very important motion moved by Senator Ndumi, because of course security is very important. Without peace, nothing will reign, Mr. President. Mr. President, this issue of humanitarian crisis is really getting out of hand, because sometimes it will go down and all of a sudden again it will rise. So I think definitely there's a need to sit down and look at it and see why this is happening and see how we could at least find solutions. Mr. President, I just want to cite an example, because last month these bandits in one of the local government in Katsina Central, that's Basari, they sent a notice that they were coming to attack a village, Mr. President. And the sole administrator of that local government reported to the unit commander of the military in that local government. But Mr. President disconguished. I mean, it was very unfortunate that, did you know what that unit commander told the sole administrator? Please, he told him, come and join the military so that you can stop that bandit's activities. This happened in Katsina, in one of the local government. Because of course there was even an interview, radio interview, with the secretary to the Ghana state government, narrating all this happenings. So Mr. President, we don't know what will happen. If at least such incident will happen and a unit commander of military to say that statement, I think it's very unfortunate. Therefore, Mr. President, I am calling on this Senate because to have at least a serious security summit, that these issues will be discussed and then come out with a solution. And Mr. President, those bandits, after sending the notice, just after 1 week they came to that village. In fact, they killed many people. In fact, the villagers were confused. They even took the corpses to the district head of that local government, and the district head took the corpses of those people to the emir of Katsina, and the emir of Katsina took them to Governor, the honorable, the executive governor of Katsina State. So could you imagine, after sending notices, and again, nothing was done and these people came. So, Mr. President, this issue, this motion is very, very important. It does not only stop in Northeast, now it's spread across the whole country. And of course, the worst heated is Northeast and Northwest. So, Mr. President, I really like to support this bill, and also added to this ad hoc committee that when the ad hoc committee is said, please, we should have this security summit, so that this issue should be discussed and then see the way out, so that our people will not be killed, properties destroyed innocently every day and every night. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I so support this bill.
Senator Anna.
It's happening in Borno State has become a recorded decimal, with thousands of children not having the hope of going to school or finding what to eat. What happened in Borno would take about 50 years to measure up the gap that the situation has created, especially for illiteracy. Because for many years, children were out of school. And most of them have become adults and will never go back to school again. That is a danger waiting to explode. But one thing is shocking in our nation, that when these things happen and we see it before us, we think it does not concern us because it has not come to our domain. Let me remind all of us here seated that what happens in Borno has a direct impact in Imo State for tomorrow. The moment that we begin to see that any danger in any part of this country is a danger in the rest of the part of this country, the better it is for us as a nation. All of us have heard about Borno. I have personally visited the place, and I can succumb and agree in total with what Senator Ndume has presented. Probably, we may not understand the urgency of now to tackle this matter, but I think the Senate should, beyond the necessary ceremonial or conventional way of presenting matters of ad hoc committee, take a step further. To go there, this time led by the Senate President himself, because of the urgency of the matter, to ascertain the true position of humanitarian crisis in that area. I've been opportune to visit one of the countries in the world with Mr. President, and one of his cries were on what is happening in Borno and Northeast. Today it has moved over to Katsina with some crisis. It's now Kaduna. Abuja is having a similar thing. While we sit in this comfortable place, let us bear in mind that Nigerians are suffering there in Borno State and other parts of this state. So mine would be to request whatever funds have been made available, or the agency, they should start working. And in our own, as a family, to dramatize the urgency of now, the need to support Borno people, I think, Mr. President, we might resolve to a committee session and see how we can create a widow's mite as a Senate to show our practical support so that other Nigerians can follow. We have enough resources in this country. We have enough wealthy people in this country. But we have not prompted people the spirit of giving to those who do not have. We have clothes we do not need. And I'm sure every senator here has boxes of clothes that he does not need, including Mr. President in his house. And all of us here. If doses are given out to them, it will help them somehow. So let's dramatize giving so that other Nigerians can give and help the poor people in our society. I so submit to Mr. President.
And Yubi. I think one of the challenges we've had in handling the humanitarian crisis in our nation has been the short-term nature of the plans we have always put in place. We have always had the impression that insurgency will soon be over, people will soon go back to their communities. So we have kind of overlooked the fact that we may actually have to start thinking about building new settlements for families. For a long time, most of our IDPs have been living in ramshackle houses, makeshift buildings, or in school premises. And some of them have been in those kind of places for years. You see, when you go, even the IDP camps here in Abuja, visited a couple of them. There's one of them, it was youth corpers that went to build toilets. The one that's not too far away from Maitama there. Youth corpers went to build toilets there. So, I mean, the reason why we have left the accommodation for IDPs has basically been because we just think it's a short-term thing and they'll soon go back to their communities. But it's not going to be a short-term process like we have seen. We have our men, women, children. Of course, the most vulnerable of all of this are the women, the children, and the elderly. Every day you read about the number of children that they are having in IDP camps. I'm sure most of those young girls are raped. And they're just having unwanted pregnancies all over the place. The situation in the IDP camps calls for us as a Senate to sit down and actually start thinking about settlements, properly built low-cost houses to accommodate the IDPs. We should not continue to leave the IDPs to live in temporary shelters for so long. The war on insurgency, like we've all seen, is going to be a long-drawn battle. No matter how fast all of us want it to end, it's not going to end like that. So we should come to that realization and know that we need a long-term solution to solving this humanitarian crisis. We are talking about when the presenter of the motion, Senator Ali Ndume, was describing the number of people from his state that are in Abuja here. What about the ones in Cameroon? What about the ones in foreign lands, in all the neighboring countries around Nigeria? You can imagine how they will be treated. Treated like outcasts, people abandoned by their people. That's the way they'll be treated. So, I mean, I don't think there's anything that is too much for us to do as a people to make these special Nigerians who have been displaced through no cause of theirs, through no fault of theirs, to feel they are part and parcel of this country. If not, we'll pay for the consequences of our inaction in years to come. The consequences of young girls who have who have children they cannot take care of. The consequences of youth who cannot go to school and who know no love for a country. The consequences of old men who will live their lives in regrets and not having a feeling of being loved by a country maybe they have sacrificed a lot for in the past. The consequences of women who have toiled all through their lives to serve their country, and then they won't have anything of benefits coming to them as a nation. So, Mr. President, I won't want to say too much because I know a lot of people have something to say about this motion, but it is important that we should actually have a long-term solution to the IDP problems in Nigeria. And we should start looking at, even if it is going to various state capitals, we have so much land in Nigeria. We can do settlements where the people can have farms and have proper homes where families can live together. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Senator James Manager.
President, I support this motion, as always, particularly a motion about the Northeast. And when you think about the Northeast and you listen to people who are from there, you have every reason to be with them, to appreciate what they are passing through. And Mr. President, the catalogue of woes that are coming from the Northeast generally, and in particular the frontline states, Borno, Yobe, and Adamawa, is more than enough to create a very serious psychological problem for human beings. And truly, in this Senate, over the years since this insurgency started, the senators that have been representing these three frontline states, they have sufficiently drawn the attention of the Senate at different times to what is happening in the Northeast. I remember even when the Senate President was on this side, particularly between 2007 and 2011, and then 2011 to 2015, this Senate was briefed sufficiently about the happenings in the Northeast. They are so committed, so passionate about the happenings in the Northeast, to the extent that Senate so far has not said no to all the presentations that have come from the Northeast by way of motions. Mr. President, that's the reason why this Senate 100% agreed that there must be Northeast Development Act, which was in the form of a bill, and it was unanimous. Senate agreed that there must be a commission to look after what is happening in the Northeast. And I also do know that there was this Northeast Development Fund. People like Rochas Okorocha, beyond this, I'm sure you can also donate to the Northeast Development Fund. I'm sure that team is still in existence. And at a time, Mr. President, this Senate was moved by people like you to make certain donations. I still remember And Mr. President, this motion is supported as it is by everybody. And we thank God that one of the senators from the Northeast is now Mr. President of Senate. And therefore it is true. Even without being Senate President, he's been going to the Northeast and to have Rochas. Perhaps what we need to do is to ensure that we create a committee on happiness for the Northeast, and particularly with Rochas as chairman of the committee. This is my Mr. President, perhaps Mr. President, my respect, talking very seriously, it was only yesterday, Mr. President, I was watching the television. The emir of Goza was returning back to his people, to his domain, after 5 years. And we were told that the emir before him, who was his father, was killed by the same incidents on his way from Gombe when he went for a ceremony. And not quite about 1 month of stay as the emir of the place, the community was attacked. And this man abdicated his throne for 5 complete years. And so, Mr. President, whatever we can do as a Senate to ensure that we create happiness to resolve this problem in the Northeast, Mr. President, 100% has always have supported this Northeast. And not on this occasion that you are now Senate President, I support it 101%. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Colleagues, I just want to talk on just one issue. Looking at the motion, between April and June, there are about 11 or so attacks. In June alone, there are about 7 attacks. Where are our security personnel? Is it that they ran away or they are implicated in one way or the other? This is, for me, is a serious matter for us to consider. Because why people run away? Because there is no security assurance that they are being protected. So, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I think this is one area that we must focus our attention to. It is not just that, we want more money for Northeast Development Commission. Yes, it requires money. It is not just that we want to make some contribution, but what is our security doing? Is it that they are overwhelmed? Is it that ill-equipped? Is it that they don't have capacity, or what? What is happening? Or does this thing have international dimension? We have to look at this thing seriously, because things cannot just continue to happen. What is happening from Chad? What is happening from Cameroon? What is happening from Niger? Why will these people always have access to attack, kill our people? Where are our security personnel? So, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I think we need to look at this matter seriously in this regard. I so present. I support the motion 100%, and we need to do a lot to forestall, expansion of the crisis. Thank you very much.
Against this motion, so we'll go to the prayers and see if there will be additional prayers for those who might have not contributed and have some ideas. We start with prayer 1. Urge the federal government to, in addition to fighting the security threats in the affected states, pay attention to the humanitarian crisis caused by the Boko Haram, ISWA, farmer herders clashes, and banditry activities. Those in favor of this prayer say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it.
In Adamawa North Central District, my prayer is for NEMA to maintain a standing presence in the IDPs camp, pending the resettlement of these people back to their communities. Thank you.
I so second.
Those in support of the additional prayer say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Colleagues, thank you very much for the various interventions. And I want to thank Senator Muhammad Adam Bulkachua, my worthy and very supportive neighbor. We share a boundary in the senatorial districts. The issue of the displaced persons and the IDPs, particularly to be specific in those states that were mentioned, and of course the subject of debate here, is a very serious issue. We have to have very coordinated approach to handling the situations in the IDP camps. As a country, we can afford to deal with the situation. We are not a very poor country. I think what we lack is the coordination of how to handle the situations there. And of course, we deploy so much resources, those that we can garner from within our country and those that have been donated. But I think even there is lack of focus, lack of really prudence in the use of utilization of those resources. So what we need to do is to ensure that we have, of course, the committee on special duties will be the committee that will be handling the Northeast Development Commission, that will be oversighted by that committee. But we, in addition, need to engage the National Planning Ministry, because those donor agencies that bring in resources should really be cleared. We should know exactly what is being brought and what the IDPs will have. In a situation where majority of the funds will come in only to pay rents and allowances of people from those agencies or donor agencies particularly, I feel is not acceptable. The bulk of the funds must be spent on the IDPs, not on allowances or rents. So we have to find a common ground with national planning, the Ministry of National Planning, because the Ministry of National Planning is supposed to ensure that every single donation into Nigeria is registered, the purpose is known, and the deployment of such resources are monitored, and we have to do that. I also believe that the Commission for Refugees and Displaced Persons needs to be properly monitored and supervised. This is one agency of government that is supposed to ensure that we handle the affairs of our unfortunate brothers and sisters who are displaced within their country in such a manner that they are able to survive there for not a long time like we experience today. These people are supposed to go back to safe towns and cities that they belong to. I could see some of our senators were even thinking we should build new cities. People have some kind of sentimental and emotional attachments to their places, and therefore we must work hard to secure those places so that our IDPs go back. And in the area of the fight against insurgency, banditry, and the rest of it, I think we are going to hold another summit. And we had a security summit in the 8th Senate, which I was privileged to head. I believe that the recommendations, there are over 20 or about 20, which the Senate at that time all agreed with. We need to know how far those recommendations have been implemented by the executive arm of government. We need to review the implementation if there was any, and if there was none, we need to find out how we can review those recommendations in the current, to address the current situations. This is a separate Senate, and therefore I feel that because we have new people, new senators, distinguished senators bringing different experiences and skills and expertise, we believe that we can add value to what was done before. So we will be able to address the situation militarily. We have to engage with the security agencies, and of course when we had that national summit, we had the collaboration and support of the executive arm of government. Actually, the summit itself was declared open by the Mr. President himself, and that was to show the level of cooperation and partnership in that time. So we will do the same thing with the view that we're able to get a better approach, and of course we will have to fund whatever it is, because we cannot ask people to go to fight without giving them the right tools to go and fight. And I want to at this point appreciate the commitments of our armed forces. Whatever anybody will say, our soldiers particularly have done so much. Some of them lost their lives, and we have to appreciate them. We appreciate what they have been doing, and we will work hard to ensure that we support them by way of appropriations as much as we can, so that they continue to fight until we succeed by the grace of God. Senate Leader.